Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. One of my favorite things about our podcast is not only bringing you these amazing guests, but we also listen to the ideas that you, my friends, my family, my listeners, bring forward to us. And several different listeners brought forward the idea that we need to bring this person onto our show today. Well, we received your ideas, we've listened to them, and we've invited her. You're going to love her. Her name is Sharon Pope. Sharon Pope is a relationship coach who has helped countless couples find clarity and confidence in their relationships. After navigating her own journey through heartbreak and then self-discovery and then lasting love, she now guides others to build relationships rooted in trust, in communication, and leading to joy. Today, Sharon joins us to share how to rekindle intimacy and fun in long-term relationships, how to bridge the divide when couples feel discouraged, and how taking radical self-responsibility can transform not just relationships, but life. She's going to be open about some of the difficulties she's had along the way, what she's learned, and ultimately what it means for you. My friends, Sharon's wisdom will challenge you to look inward, embrace curiosity, and take ownership of the love you want to experience in your life. Whether you're searching for clarity in a relationship or you simply want to strengthen the connections in your life, you will walk away from this episode feeling empowered, hopeful, and ready to take the next right step. So let me loop her into the conversation. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode with my friend and now yours. Her name is Sharon Pope. Sharon, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you so much. I am almost beyond words. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I'm thrilled to meet you, and I'm just excited to speak to your community.
Well, the
Thank you.
hilarious thing is I always spend a little bit of time with my guests before I hit record, but almost never 25 minutes. And that's what you and I have already done. And finally, I'm like, Sharon, at some point, you and I have to do our jobs. So
Right.
now we are recording. Now we can be more professional and buttoned up as we go to work. And we talk about what it looks like to live inspired in relationships and beyond. So for those who are hearing the name Sharon Pope for the first time, if you were forced to introduce yourself,
Mm.
how do you like to introduce yourself when you meet someone in a grocery store at a cocktail party when they say, Sharon, what do you do?
So, what do? I help women in midlife who are struggling in what feels like a lonely or disconnected marriage get the confidence and the clarity that they need to either fix the struggles in their marriage or move forward without regret. But who I am is I'm a wife and a daughter and a stepmom and a grandma and a yaya and and a good friend. Yeah. And a mother to two very spoiled miniature golden doodles. That too. Don't forget the babies.
That's a full boat. So we're going to talk a little bit about the babies and the grandbabies
All
and
of
the
it.
stepchildren and the husband and everything else you have going on in your life. But instead of talking first about the professional work today,
Mm.
I think we're like trees, and like the inner core of the tree has formed us ultimately to become the ladies and gentlemen we grow into later on in life. For me, Sharon, I had perfect role models in front of me as a child. And like a lot of people might claim that, but I really did. I just had amazing parents. I have four amazing sisters. I have one awesome brother. We got cool neighbors on both sides. The neighbors across the street used to bring us food every couple weeks. They were from a different part of the world, and their food was always eclectic and incredible. My childhood was awesome.
Mm.
And in witnessing my mom and dad's love for their kids, for one another, and for life, I realized that's who I want to be, man. I see
Mm.
in front of me what I hope one day to give my kids. When you were growing up, what was life like for you?
Say it was normal. What I mean by that is not too sad, not too happy. It was stable for the most part, especially younger. It was stable. Mom stayed home with us until I went off to kindergarten and then she went back to work. But then in my teen years, or call it like around 10, things started to get a little tumultuous because my dad managed hotels for a living. And so he would either quit or he'd get fired. And so we would go from a place of financially stable to then unstable all of a sudden. And then when he would have to get a new job, we would have to move, which for me as a kid meant, oh, we're moving states. We have to find a new home. I have to find new friends. It was like every 3-ish years, 3, maybe 4 years, we were moving. And then it was this roller coaster of we're fine financially. Now we're not fine. We're fine financially. We're not fine. My parents, it was one of those things where I knew they loved me. I knew they loved each other, but we weren't expressive with that love. There wasn't a lot of hugs. There wasn't a lot of affection. There wasn't a lot of I love yous. There wasn't a lot of coddling. There was a little bit of suck it up, buttercup. You know, we're moving. I know you're sad. This is what we got to do. So it wasn't unloving, but it's not the experience that you just described of your beautiful example that you grew up with.
You've had a little bit of time, not only a couple decades, but also clinically to think through why that might be with your dad.
Mm.
Working successfully for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, and then just flaming out, either quitting or getting fired, and then we pack up and move town. Why do you think that was? What was it about your dad that had him do the work for a while and then bail on it?
Mm. So much about my dad and his upbringing, like, because we all just live out our upbringings,
Right?
was that he very much needed to be right. Sometimes that would cause upset. He wasn't terribly manageable or coachable. He really thought that his perspective was correct. I read the book, The Happiness Advantage, and I saw that you had Sean Acor on the podcast at one point. There was an example in that book. This was probably 10 years ago. I read that book. It was a long time ago. And they were talking about IRS agents and how you literally are training your brain to go looking for what's wrong. And then that impacts every part of your life because that's what you're trained and rewarded to do. And I feel like my dad would come into managing hotels, and usually they're in trouble if you have to find a new manager. So it was like he'd come in and he had to find what was wrong. And so I think like that really resonated with me, that he was always looking for what was wrong and how he could fix it because he had to have the answers. And so I think that that in many ways, probably made him successful in some parts of his life and not so successful in some other parts of his life.
Well, I know you become wildly successful in parts of your life professionally, certainly. Did you always know you wanted to go into marketing? How did that happen?
Oh my gosh. No. So,
No?
no. So I wanted to be an interior designer. And then I got into college and I really loved psychology and I wanted to go into psychology. But then someone told me, you can't do anything with psychology unless you go get an advanced degree. So you got a total of 8 years, another at least 4 years ahead of you. And at the time, I was like, I don't want to do that. I was ready to get out and start living. And so I was like, okay, I'll do design. I did that until this summer or between my junior and senior year when I decided to change my major, which my parents were super excited about. Changing my major. I had had an internship and I realized that designers don't make any money. So I was like, well, I'm going to go into marketing in the design industry. I'd been getting a marketing undergrad. So I got this specialized studies degree. I got out and I got a job in marketing in the design field, and I loved it. And then from there, I didn't want to move away. I'm a Midwesterner too, and I didn't want to move away. And so then I decided to change going from design to like payments and banking and not so sexy creative stuff, but I made more money. So I was successful at it. And people used to always ask me, if you could do anything, Sharon, would you do marketing again? And I would always be like, heck no, no, no. I would write books. I would be a public speaker. I'd do some psychology. I would I didn't love marketing, but I was good at it.
And you did that for almost 20 years, and I don't want to get to the finish line quite yet. So we'll let you just do some marketing. And in the midst of that, you find love.
Hmm.
Talk about your first marriage. Talk about what first led you to fall in love with him.
Yeah. So we met in grad school, which is funny, right? Because I said I didn't want to go back to school and then I went right back to school and got my MBA. So this was my early 20s. I had been dating different guys and, like most of us, got hurt. And so I was like, that doesn't feel good. So I decided I was just going to date the nice guys. That's what I was going to do. And so when I got into graduate school, it was probably my late 20s. And I remember seeing him and I remember thinking, he looks like a really nice guy. He looks like a banker, actually. And in fact, he was. And we ended up meeting up and we started dating. And it was about a year into the relationship. And he hadn't yet told me that he loved me, which now I can look back and go, that was some pretty important information, Sharon. And instead, because of who I was at that time, I was very driven, very independent. Let's just call it controlling. So, like any controlling woman with a plan, I gave him an ultimatum. And I said, either you love me and we're going to start building a life together, or you don't, and we should call this quits. And so he acquiesced, said he loved me, and I took it from there. And we started building a house and we moved in together and we planned a wedding and he just sort of came along for that ride. Not he's an adult making grown decisions, like, but I do take a lot of responsibility for not just sort of checking in with how are you really feeling? And is this right for you? And is this right for me? It was more like he's a nice guy. I remember exactly where I was, and we'd only been dating 3 months. And I remember I was driving, I was getting on the freeway, and I thought to myself, I'm going to make this work because he won't hurt me.
So your drive to remain get from getting hurt was more powerful than your drive to see something truly beautiful take place in your life and in
Thousand,
your relationships.
1000%.
You think
Right.
that
And if you look at we're talking about my dad and his upbringing, and then you think about like, because that impacted me. That was me trying to keep myself safe. My dad, his version of safe was being right. My version of safe was not getting hurt emotionally, but it was still this underlying, like, keep yourself safe.
there's the C.S. Lewis quote, and I wish I could just boom,
Yeah.
throw it out at you about locking your heart in a trunk and
Mm,
it will stay safe, right? Because no one will be able to hurt it. But at that same time, it will rot up and dry up and ultimately become useless.
yeah.
And sometimes in a relationship like this, that's what slowly begins to happen. Like it just seeps the life and the love and the vibrancy out of both people.
Yeah.
You slowly step forward into this relationship and you stay in this thing for more than a decade. I'm sure you tried everything to make it work. Just walk us through. You've been public about this before, and you're not the first or the last person to go through a divorce. What happened that led up to yours?
It was about 8 years in that I started to notice how other couples engaged with each other. There was a presence, a connection, certainly an affection that was there with them that felt very foreign to me. And I didn't know how to get it. I didn't know how to create it. It wasn't anything that I had experienced. I can even look back and say, I know why I chose him because I didn't grow up in an affectionate household. Neither did he. And so I didn't have to stretch that muscle. But I just felt like there was something really missing. And so I, went to him and we would talk about it and I would ask for more affection. And, like most women, I think we go to our spouses and we're like, this is what I need. This is what I want. Can you give it to me? Now I can look back and go, I should have went, how can I be more affectionate with you? How can I open up my heart to you in a new way? I didn't do any of that. I just wanted him to serve it up on a silver platter. And then frankly, I didn't know how to receive it because I hadn't had that modeled for me. So we had this sort of roommate type scenario. And I kept asking for more affection and connection. He didn't really know what that meant. He said, can you tell me what that is? What do you want me to do? Just tell me what you want me to do. And I remember one time I said, okay, I'm going to need a hug a day. And so, he dutifully came home and would give me a hug a day. And I remember I was standing in the kitchen one time. I'd gotten home from work earlier than him, and I was probably just getting dinner ready or whatever. And he comes in and he had his satchel or whatever in his hand. And he comes over and he gives me one of those one arm buddy hugs, like a shoulder to shoulder hug. And I was like, oh, I'm going to need to be more prescriptive. Can you put that down and give me a two-hand hug? So that gives you a sense for like a little bit of just, it was awkward almost in terms of our level of affection and where we could meet each other there. And so He tried and I tried. And certainly, I think I gave up before he did. My ex-husband was and is a good, kind-hearted human being. And what I am eternally grateful for is he is remarried to someone now that I suspect thinks he is the cat's meow. No changes required. Probably thinks he's incredible and amazing in all the ways, because in many ways he really, really is.
We could spend the remaining aspects of our time on that and what happened, what led to it, what went wrong, what could have gone right.
Yeah.
Instead, I think for you, it forced in ultimately a very positive way for you to take a deeper look at yourself, at the reflection in the mirror. You get a second chance at life.
Yes.
And you talk about you were trying to find the person who would be like kind of Mr. Right. And you realize you couldn't find that person. You had to become that person. Can you expand on that? Because and before you do, I think that's true. Anyone not in a relationship right now, that's what they're seeking. That person
Yep.
will complete them, Jerry Maguire. You complete me. Thank heavens. And you challenge that belief system with saying, yeah, that's lovely in Hollywood, but what you need is to become that person first.
Yeah. So once my marriage had ended, and then I was dating different men, and I'm trying to find the one, I'm trying to find the perfect match and all this. And it was just explosion after explosion, little mini explosion. Like nothing was really working. Nothing felt sustainable. And so ultimately, what I realized was the only common denominator here is me. And so I had to start getting really honest with myself. It's really not about them, it's about me. And if this was the kind of relationship that I wanted to have, who did I need to become in order to attract that, to create it, and to be able to sustain it? And that I can't even tell you that there was like this one pivotal moment that I got that, but somewhere in that time of my life, I really got it. And that was the thing that shifted everything in my life because it got me on the path to taking such radical self-responsibility of the only thing that I can ever control is myself. So I had spent my 20s and 30s trying to control anything and everyone so that I could feel safe. And then that's really when I got it that the only thing that I can really ever control is myself. But that's a lot.
When people are listening to this conversation, it's easy, I think, even to miss what that means to control yourself.
Mm.
I think we understand a little bit about what it means to try to control your mother-in-law or your overreachy dad or spouse, whatever it might be. When you say, I had to take radical responsibility for my life,
Mm.
give us some examples of what that meant in your case.
So, how had I contributed to the failure of my marriage? What was my role? Because it was my first inclination, like many people's, is how are we not a good fit or how is he wrong for me or whatever. I never really got into like blaming him because he was such a good human. But like, what did I do to facilitate the coming together and the demise of that marriage? What was my role in the creation of the relationships that came after him? And twice in between there, like I really met someone that I loved, but that exploded too. It wasn't like those weren't healthy. It doesn't mean that they were sustainable, but that also doesn't mean that I didn't love those people. So I had to look at that. And even, and now you fast forward to today, and this past weekend, I had had an upset with a friend. And it always takes me like, it takes a minute. It doesn't always happen like immediately. But within I'll call it half a day. I was like, what was my part? What was my part? And then I went and I owned that and I apologized for that. And this is the repair stuff in relationships that we don't do enough because we don't have to be perfect. Like people might look at me and go, Sharon, you're a relationship coach. You should do every relationship perfectly all the time. Just ask my husband. It's not true. like, like I do my best and I have way more tools than the average bear, but that doesn't mean I don't screw it up. But what I will do is I will take responsibility for it. I'll own it. And if I'm in the wrong, for sure, I'm going to apologize. And if you're in the wrong and you apologize, I'm going to accept it on the very first apology. You don't have to do it 100 times.
I've heard you say that what you don't heal from a previous relationship, you will carry into the next one.
That's right.
Tell me what that means in your mind.
So if your fear is abandonment, you'll keep looking for someone who won't leave you. And you might think that's everybody, but it's not. There's a phrase for it. It's called the wounded bird, like someone who will never leave because they're not secure enough or they're not whatever enough. If your wound is you need to stay safe because you're afraid of being hurt emotionally, you will choose people that are safe for you and won't ever hurt you. They may not ever challenge you either. They may not help you grow. And those are the best relationships, but they'll keep you safe, right? So it's just whatever you don't heal, you're just going to carry forward. And that's why sometimes when people they come to the conclusion that their answer is to end the marriage, I'm like, you know what? You still have to get equipped with these tools because otherwise you're just going to take yourself. You take yourself with you into future relationships. That's why first marriages might end at 40 to 50%, but second marriages end at 68%, and third marriages end at 73%. And that's because you take yourself with you. But so many times we go, oh, it's their problem. If I get rid of them, problem solved. Oh no, my friend. You're just going to create the same sort of dysfunction in a different pair of pants.
So I've also heard you say, if you don't love to hang out with yourself, why would anyone else? And it's such a great expression because I think most of us are looking for the other person to complete us,
Yeah.
to make us feel whole when we get home, or to fill us up in the morning before we go off to work or get the kids out the door. As we move toward retirement, whatever the thing is, we're waiting for the other.
Mm.
And you're constantly bringing people back to, oh, what's your part? What's your part? What's your part? If you don't love to hang out with yourself, why would anyone else? So, first of all, unpack that quote. And then, secondly, for those of us who don't love to hang out with ourselves, how do we begin to fall in love with that person again?
Mm. I think that we are not meant to do life alone. So there's nothing wrong with wanting relationship, an intimate relationship, and having like that person, like your person. There's nothing wrong with all of that. But when you are able to really enjoy your own company and think you're the coolest person to hang out with and you really enjoy your own company, then you become easier to be in relationship with. I don't want to discount that like there's something wrong with you. Like if you want to have a partner, that's cool. But if you cannot be alone, if you are scared to death to be alone or to feel the emotion of loneliness, you will settle 100% of the time in your relationships. Because then all you're doing is you're needing a warm body to be there beside you because you're so afraid to face yourself and be with yourself that you will put up with things that aren't in alignment with who you are and what you want and what you deserve. We got to heal that need to always have someone else there. So I had that when I was going through my divorce and then trying to find love again. That was not an easy time for me. And there was a lot of soul searching and there was a lot of digging. That was when I started writing a memoir and all this stuff, right? And I would keep myself busy, like going from morning to night so that I could just come home and like pass out in the bed. And the reason was because if I got still and quiet with myself, I would have some questions that would pop up and I would have to answer those questions. And those would be uncomfortable questions. But that's once I did it, once I forced myself, I was like, Sharon, you just need to sit your butt down, sit at home, be with your own self, get a journal, girl, like write some things down, get it out of your head, get it on paper, make sense of what is happening for you. And when the questions come up, just face them. That was where I really got to know myself so well and got really comfortable with myself. And then it became whoever came into my experience added to my experience. It wasn't like they needed to fill some gap or some hole. It was like, no, I'm good. It's like, I think of it as like cake and icing. It's like, I got the cake. Like, if you bring icing, cool. But like, the cake is really good.
So the cake is now good, and in steps the icing. Tell me about Derek. Derek, who I've done a little bit of recon on, is like a stud, man. I mean, he is just a cool man. So, where did you meet Derek, and what did you fall in love with in regard to Derek?
Oh my gosh. So Derek is my husband, and we met online. I had been online for a couple years, and this was really funny. I'll tell you this quick story. So we went on our first date. He invited me for dinner, which, first of all, I was like, wait, a real date for dinner? Because usually online, it's like they want to meet you for coffee or a drink. They don't want to commit to dinner yet, So he didn't know any better. He invited me to dinner. And so we went to dinner. And he said, oh, my mom, she's really worried about me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a mama's boy. What's the deal? And I said, why is your mom worried about you? And he said, well, this is my very first internet date. And I said, wait, what? I'm your first internet date? He said, yeah. I go, how did that happen? And he said that he had been married for 20-ish years. I want to say 20, 22. I'm not sure exactly, 20-ish years. And he had two children with his ex-wife. And he had dated one woman after they had divorced. And then, so my husband is an ex-firefighter, paramedic, and he was at the firehouse. And a guy brought his fiance up and introduced him to the guys. And Derek said to him, hey, she seems really nice. Where'd you meet her? He said, well, I met her online. He's like, what is that? How do you do that? And he said, you just pick a site, you post a picture, you say something about yourself, and then people start, talking to you. So he did that. He posted a picture, he said something about himself, and he chose this, random site. And apparently he walked away and he came back to it a few days later, and there's like 100 messages because my husband he's very handsome.
He's obnoxiously handsome.
He's
He's like a
obnoxiously
man's
handsome.
man. He's probably able to not only put out a fire, but start one if you had to.
He's amazing. So I guess he came back to lots of messages, and apparently mine was one of them. I could not tell you what it said, although he still has it saved today. He could probably tell you what it said at the time. And he reached out to me, and we engaged over email, and then we spoke on the phone a little bit. Then we went to dinner, and here we are. And I just couldn't believe. I was like, wait a minute, I'm your very first internet date? That's crazy. Do you know how many frogs I've kissed? So my husband is, well, he's a very good looking man, of course, but he truly, and this might sound weird to describe a man this way, but he is as beautiful inside as he is outside. Like he is an incredible human with an enormous heart. And he's gentle and he's generous and loving and kind and strong. And it works, like we work really well together because, still particularly in my business life, I'm still very like, if I have any type A ladies listening, I get you. I'm still driven. I work a lot. I do a lot. I get things done. I call it GSD, get stuff done. But when it comes to our relationship, because he is so, like, call it strong masculine energy, I have to dial it down for us to be able to work together. Otherwise, we're going to just do this all the time. I remember one time we were making the bed and the Today Show was on, and someone was on there and they were talking about how one person is always in charge of the relationship. And I thought that was kind of funny. And so I said, who do you think's in charge of our relationship? And I 100% thought he was going to say me because I 100% thought it was me. And he goes, I am, of course. And I was like, wait, what? And I thought about it for like probably 20 seconds. And I was like, yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, I'm good.
This relationship is going to lead ultimately to you being comfortable enough in your own skin
Mm,
to do the kind of work that allows you to serve other folks out there who are struggling in their relationships.
so true.
I mean, it's an iterative process, and I'm going to kind of fast forward because I want to get specifically into a couple of questions.
Okay.
But you're seeking the next right step. You refer to it not as being fired, but freed from your job as a CMO, which is an
Yeah.
unusual, cool way to describe
Yeah.
being liberated from employment. You then find yourself in a coaching, first maybe career coaching, then maybe
Mhm.
executive career coaching, and then ultimately relationship. And then specifically, you mentioned it already about the individuals you're serving today, but how did you stumble into specifically who you wanted to serve?
So I'll back up just a hair for a second.
Yeah.
I knew that when I got freed from my job, I didn't know what was ahead. But when I saw that Martha Beck had a coaching program, I thought, oh my gosh, that's going to help me with whatever is next. I still didn't know what was next. I didn't even know what a life coach was. But I thought, well, I'd had executive coaches. So sometimes we talked about personal stuff. Maybe that's what that is. But I just knew this was going to help me sort of clarify, clear the cobwebs off, if you will.
Right.
And so I got into it. And then I started to see how like writing and speaking and coaching and things like that could sort of all come together on a platform. When I got my coaching certification and I started building a coaching practice, I had a coach at the time, and everyone was saying, you should just be an executive coach. And so I did that a little bit. I tiptoed into it, but I never fully committed to it. And every time I would speak to someone and they would talk to me about how they were mad at their boss or ticked off at their peers that they were making more money, I just wanted to poke myself in the eye. It just wasn't my thing. I feel like that had just played out. For me, it just, that ship had sailed. There
Yeah.
wasn't energy there for me. I knew how to make it work intellectually, made perfect sense. And so the coach at the time, she said, what is it that you want to talk about all day long if you weren't even being paid for it? And I was like, oh, all I want to talk about is love and heartbreak and marriage and struggle and blah. And she's like, okay, good. Can we stop talking about all the business stuff, please? And so even from there, though, I started with helping newly divorced women find love again. And that was okay. But I really like big shifts. I don't know if it's the dopamine hit I'm chasing or what, but I like to see people have really big shifts. And dating is a slow process, and it should be. Then I went into heartbreak. So where they were broken up with in some way, whether that was just a dating relationship or a marriage, and the marriage ended. And I did like that work, but it was heavy work because they're very much in meltdown mode. You're feeling all the feelings all the time. So I focused on that for about a year. And then I got into stay or go because there were so many people that were contacting me about that sort of realm. And I thought, let me just explore this a little bit. And so I got a few clients in that range. And then I went, oh, this is it. This is what I love. And honestly, I have just never looked back. And so I've been doing this 12 years. This has probably been 10 years of just stay or go.
So I mentioned into our online community that I had the honor of interviewing you today and invited them to send in some questions to this 9-time author who really is expert in this space. And the most common question came either in regards to intimacy or
Mhm.
lack thereof in a marriage, or this gradual schism that seems to be pushing couples farther and farther and farther apart.
Mhm.
And to me, they're not the same question, but they're similar enough that I'm going to ask it as one. For those who are struggling with intimacy in their relationship, they're struggling with the sense of growing apart from one another in a relationship. Give us some ideas of what we can do, what they can do to grow closer together with their loved one, with their partner, with their spouse.
Yeah. I wish someone would have told me and would tell all of us when we get married, look, there's this nurturing, loving, safe, predictable feeling of home that comes with love and marriage. And that is a beautiful thing. But there is also a part of you where you crave some desire and some adventure and something that you can be curious about and to explore. And that desire part of you, if you don't nurture it, it will die. It's like a fire that you just don't tend to. And so it will die out. You have to pay attention to that. The friendship and the way you function and co-parent and all that, that will probably, like, I don't say it'll come naturally, but it'll come way more naturally because you have to function. Like that's how marriages and families function is on routine and predictability and stability and all of that. That's how you function really well. But that other part of you, still needs a little bit of tending to here and there so that it can stay alive. So I wish someone would have told me that. When people get to a place of disconnection in their marriage over the course of years, the thing that I would tell you is that your first order of business is not to try to get that fire going ablaze again to where it's a big bonfire. That's a really big jump. You can get there, but there are steps to getting there. You have to then walk through trust. Like, do I emotionally trust this person? Do I trust them with my heart? Do I trust them with my innermost thoughts? Is there friendship? Is there even fun? Like, are we still having fun anymore? Because I don't know. A lot of marriages, and then with family and everything, it's like the fun got sucked right out of the marriage. Who has time for fun anymore? And so there's a lot of steps to then getting to a place of where there's real intimacy in the relationship. And then there's the place of where, okay, we can talk about sex and your clothes wanting to pop off and all the things. Okay, fine. But like sometimes people will use that as like, they'll say to me, Sharon, I just like, I can't ever see myself desiring my partner again or wanting to have sex with my partner again. And so is this just done? And I'm like, look, it's not just done. There is a path back to that. It's not an easy path. It's not a quick path. But there is a path, but it is also not your first order of business. We've got to figure out what are the elements of the marriage that have not been working for you that created the disconnection. There's probably some resentments that have been built up that need to be seen through a different lens and potentially forgiven so that you can open your heart again in a safe way. And then you can start moving up that ladder. I call it the ladder from disconnection back to desire, of like moving through those steps to get back to a place of where there really is desire in your marriage. Because I'll tell you, like we were talking about Derek and how handsome he is. Okay, fine. But like even after 14 years together, like it's not like I look at him and my clothes just want to pop off every day. Like that's not how it happens in marriage. It's that's not realistic.
Speak for yourself, Sharon.
Okay, fine.
I'm just making sure my wife is still tuning into these
Yeah,
podcasts
yeah.
so I can
She's
get
gonna be
yelled at
like, thank you,
tonight.
darling.
All right. So give us then one step to do exactly that. One step to have a little bit more fun. One step
Mm,
to make sure we're a little more trustworthy and trust willing. Just
mm.
take a baby step toward it before asking a follow-up question.
Well, all right, let's go down the fun route because everyone can relate to that. And even if you're not struggling in your marriage, if you feel like you've lost some of that fun factor in your marriage, like it might be a good time to reach for that. That's a very personal thing of what you find fun. Some people might find hiking fun. I'm not a hiker, but you might love it. This was mostly when we lived in Ohio because since we moved to Florida, we've not found a comedy club. But I will tell you what, every 5 or 6 months, I was like, Derek, I need you to take me to a comedy club. I just need to laugh. I need to get my laugh on. Like, because I live in a very sort of serious place so much in my life that this sometimes I'm like, let's just go laugh at silly stuff. Can we, please? And he would always oblige. So I think it depends what it might be ice skating, it might be, but don't make it with the family. It's not a family thing. This is a couples thing. And this is where it's part of the challenge of how we got to this place is we prioritize the family, of course, but we forget and neglect the couple. And the couple is the foundation of the family. And so we've got to pay attention to us as a couple because otherwise, everything we build on top of that, we can liken it to walls and a roof and all that. That's kids and a home and a mortgage and jobs and careers and families and all that. It's on shaky ground if you two are not solid. And so it's really important that you two invest in your marriage. And it is the greatest gift that you can give to your children. Even as you said, you were talking about your parents' example that they gave to you. What a gift that was for you to know that, like, you two matter as a couple. Yes, the kids matter. Of course, they matter, but you two also matter. And so try to find something that feels fun. And it can be anything. It can be travel, it can be a comedy club, it can be ice skating or hockey, something you've never done before, something you've always wanted to do, something you've been curious about, something you might suck at and not be good at, and just have fun.
Well, it's funny. It almost like with medicine, once it starts working, you stop taking it.
Yeah.
Whether it's blood pressure, kidney relief, whatever it is, once it starts working, you stop. And the thing that brought us, you and Derek together, and Beth and John, and every other couple out there together, once you get there, you frequently stop doing the very thing that brought you there, which is
Mhm.
such a mistake. So date again, have fun again. One of the other questions we received a lot of is around finances,
Oh,
financial stress,
yep.
different versions of how people should allocate their resources, different priorities in what they want to spend their monies on. So for the couples that you serve, for the ladies frequently that you serve that see things differently than their spouse,
Mm.
how do you get aligned around finances?
So the first thing I would say is start to look at this through the lens of you're not right and he's not right. You're not wrong and he's not wrong. No one is right or wrong here. You have different perspectives. It's just a perspective, it's an opinion. We deal with money based upon how we grew up with it. We create beliefs about it, and then our beliefs we think are facts. And my friends, feelings are not facts, and opinions are not facts. So if you can come to the table with more of a curiosity about why your partner sees it the way they do, and even exploring like, well, where did that come from? Where did that belief come from in you? So that you can understand each other. Like even just starting from that place of
Right.
assuming you didn't marry an idiot. There's some good reason why they see it the way they do. And just like there's some good reason why you see it the way you do, if you start from that place, you are setting yourself up for such a better, more productive conversation than probably the way you've been coming at it, which is trying to get them to see it from your perspective because you genuinely believe you're right. But my friends, your partner believes the same thing, that they're genuinely right and they're trying to get you to see it their way. So here we are.
I've heard you in other conversations talk about almost becoming a watcher.
Yeah.
And this is usually more around emotions than specific conflict, but I think
Mhm.
it applies here too. Tell our audience what it means to become a watcher.
Becoming a watcher is about sort of pulling yourself out of the emotion of it to really see what's going on. So I almost think of it like a bird that sort of rises up and flies around and just watches what's happening. Like if sometimes I'll ask my clients, like if I was a fly on the wall, what would I see? When you said that, then what did he say? And then when he said that, how did you feel? And then when you like if I could just watch. And so the more you can become detached from what is happening emotionally, then you're not so invested in trying to get your way and trying to be right and trying to be seen and heard and understood and all the stuff. If you approach it with, how can I learn more about you? There's something here for me to learn, which is also an element, by the way, of moving up that ladder towards intimacy of don't stop being curious about your partner. You're always changing, they're always changing. When we get to a place of where we're like, oh, I know everything there is to know, that's when you get bored. But that's never true. They're always changing. And so are you.
I've heard you say this a bunch, and it's surprising the first time I heard you say it. And now the more I wrestle with them, the more I think you're right on this. Here, this is your quote. These 5 words, till death do us part, are ruining marriages. Explain that
Uh,
to me.
I know. All right. So everyone who their backs just got up right now.
No, first
Oh,
time I heard you say that, I'm like, well, come on. Like
come
that's
on.
one of the things that forces the glue, baby. We need that.
Ah.
But I've heard you explain why you've said that, and it made some sense to me. So tell our audience.
Yeah. So when we say the words till death do us part, what many times happens is that we put our marriage over on a shelf. We're like, oh, did that. Found the guy, found the woman, happy, everything's good. And now I'm going to pour my love and my time and my attention and my energy into what's next, whether that's my career or business or family, children, whatever. Like I'm going to pour it into that. But nothing thrives when you turn your back on it. We could be talking about your bank account. If you never look at your bills and you never look at your credit report and you never look at how much you have in the bank, that bank account's probably not thriving. We could be talking about a child. We don't just bring a child into the world and be like, hey, you know what? I gave birth to you. I'm all done. I did my part. Figure it out, kid. Like, we don't do that. And we could be talking about a house plant. Okay. If you don't water it, you don't put it in the sun, it's not going to thrive. So nothing thrives when you turn your back on it. But for some reason, we think with marriage, it should just be effortless. And now that we both love each other, and so therefore we can put it over here. And those words of like, you can't ever leave, no matter how miserable we make each other. It's like our only marker for success in marriage these days is longevity. Did we last until we died? If we did, that was a success. And I think we need a different marker for success than just longevity. I think that's beautiful when it happens. But what if happiness and growth were part of that equation? Not that my partner's there to make me happy, but like, does it feel good most of the time? Can we help each other grow and become more of who we each are, become a better version of who we are? Like Derek for sure makes me a better person. That doesn't, and by the way, that doesn't always come through joy. Usually it comes through a little pain.
Yeah, welcome to marriage till death
Right.
do us part. So I'm glad Derek is helping you become a better version of yourself. You
Yeah.
have so many little quotable moments, and I'm not going to walk you through all of them because we will completely run out of time. But two more quotes.
Sure.
This is one that I've heard you say a bunch, and I've used it now a bunch. A mind that is confused does nothing.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah. It's so true. And so as it relates to challenges in marriage, I'll put it in a situation. Let's say that a wife comes to her husband and says, I'm not happy, because that happens a lot. Well, the husband is like, oh, okay, well, what's going on? And why are you feeling that way? And, wants to understand. But we don't tell him what to do. We don't give him the breadcrumbs. We just think he should know what he should be doing to make us happy. And then when he doesn't do that, we make it mean he doesn't care. He doesn't love us. This is the wrong marriage, something along those lines. And none of that is true. It just means he doesn't know what to do. So, in order to not screw it up further, he's going to do nothing. So, if you can give someone option A and option B, they're much more likely to be able to make a choice. But if you give them option A, B, C, D, E, one, two, three, like it's too much. And it causes your brain to just sort of, it's like a gear that just freezes up. Like,
right.
I don't know what to do. So this is why communication is so critical in our relationships, because our partners are not mind readers and they do not see and experience the world the same way that we do. They don't. And so we've got to be able to help explain that to them. It's a kind thing to do, is to explain that.
It's going to be hard for me to pick the final quote because I'm looking at six of them, but I think I'll choose number five.
Miney mo.
If you're struggling with a negative emotion or a thought, simply ask yourself this question: what am I making this mean?
This is one of my favorite tools. This is one of my favorite tools of just realizing, what am I making it mean? Because once you realize you're giving meaning to anything, see, circumstances in our lives are neutral. Okay. And a circumstance is, I'm wearing a pink sweater. This wall is gray. I'm talking to John. Like those are circumstances. They're not positive or negative until we have a thought about them, until we give it meaning. Our thoughts give the circumstances of our lives meaning. That's why some people can look at, something and say, that's amazing. I think that's great. And someone else will go, that's horrible. I don't know why you would ever think that. And it's the exact same scenario. It's just our thoughts about it. And our life experience creates our thoughts. So the minute you realize that we're giving meaning to things, then you realize how powerful you are to be able to give it a different meaning. Right. And sometimes it's just a little shift. You don't have to go from my husband doesn't love me to my husband is confused. Maybe he doesn't know what to do. Maybe I could give him the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe he loves me in a way that is just different than the way that I receive love. Like that's just a shift in thought, but it opens up so much possibility where my husband doesn't love me, just shuts you down. It just locks it all up. I just often will go, if I feel a negative emotion like guilt or anger or upset, if I have the presence of mind, I can ask myself, what am I making this mean? And it will help me choose more consciously what I'm making it mean. So it's helpful.
We are an inch away from what we call the Live Inspired Seven. But since I have a relationship expert with me right now, I want to ask you one more question
Okay.
on the relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, many of our listeners are married, not all. Many
Mhm.
of our relationships have relationships with children or grandchildren or nephews or neighbors or somebody. And yet, every one of our listeners is trying to elevate the way they do life. And you empower people to live a better life.
Mhm.
For those of us right now listening to this conversation, longing for that in our own walk, in our own world, in our own relationships, starting with the one in the mirror, what's something that you do every day, or for the most part, almost every day, that you found very meaningful, very beneficial as you have had a better relationship in your own life?
So I have a daily practice, and my daily practice is first I have to make my coffee because that's a whole experience. But
I'll meet you
um,
down there. Me too.
yeah. But then I will read a little bit of something. There's certain books that where I love when they put it in where it's like short chapters or like one page things, something inspirational that kind of gets me off on the right foot. I will meditate for 15, no more than 20 minutes, and then I will go move my body in some way. Now, you might say that there's nothing miraculous about that because there's not. But here's what it does. What I'm doing subconsciously is I'm telling myself, me first, then you, right? Because when I put myself on my own agenda first thing in the morning, before anyone else gets a hold of me, before the day gets a hold of me, I show up as a better wife. I show up as a better coach. I show up as a better human. I show up as a better woman, sister, friend, all of it. I'm better because I have, it's like going to the, like when you run out of gas, you don't just like, oh, I guess I'll just wait for someone to bring me more gas. Like, no, you go to the gas station and you fill yourself up. But we need to consistently fill ourselves up so that we can be our best self, so we can show up as our best self. And so we can be proud of how we're showing up because that's really the deal is can you look yourself in the mirror and go, I'm proud of who I am. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean anything. It just means I feel pretty good about who I am and how I'm showing up in my life and for the people that I love.
Sharon Pope, you know this already because we chatted about it on the front side of our conversation before I hit the word record.
I had
Put
to
that word into the
prepare.
Live Inspired Seven. So you ran the gauntlet. Here we go. Buckle up.
Okay.
Question number one, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Okay. So this was the hardest question, but I did choose one. And it was the 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think by Brianna Wiest.
All right, I'm unfamiliar with it.
Oh, it's a really cool book. And it's one of those where it's like really short chapters with little pithy truth bomb sort of things. And I'll tell you my two favorite. There's 101 essays. Pay attention to number 42 and number 48. 42, I wrote it down, is things emotionally healthy people know how to do. I love that one. And number 48 is 16 reasons you still don't have the love you want. So check that out. It's good.
Good. It's a great homework. What's one positive characteristic or one positive trait that you possessed as a little girl growing up and you wish you exhibited a little bit more so today?
Creativity for the purpose of creating something, like just for the purpose of expression, not like I create like writing books and I create courses and I create things in my life, but they all have a purpose. And it was about, I don't know, 3 months ago, I sat down and colored one of those mandala, one of those like colored pencil things. And my husband is like, what are you doing? Like, I've never seen you do this in your life. And it was just fun. It was just creativity for no reason. And I don't do that very often. So I could stand to do a little bit more of that.
If your home caught fire and all living people and things and dogs are out, you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item. What's the one thing you would grab?
Okay, so I told you I prepared. I didn't know that question was coming. And I literally, I walked around my house. There's nothing. I would not run back into the house. And here's the reason why. Even the sentimental stuff. I've had two experiences in my life where I basically lost all the things in my life. One of them was my divorce. Another one was where someone bought my house and all the contents in it.
I was
So I
going to
was
ask you about that. Yeah.
I was like I don't know, 48-year-old woman who didn't own silverware for a moment because she bought everything. I no longer have attachment to anything. And the things that are most precious to me are people, are memories, and are the lessons that I've gotten along the way. And I take that with me. I wouldn't, there's nothing.
I know your mother recently passed away with Alzheimer's, and I'm sorry about that. There's nothing that she left you, no little bracelet.
It was one, she
Big,
didn't leave it to me. My dad gave it to me. And that was the only thing I thought about. She has a ring. It wasn't her wedding ring. My dad still has that. My dad's still living. It was just a little emerald ring. And I thought about that, like that might be the thing that I would come back in for. But I really like, I remember my grandmother's hope chest. I had my grandmother's hope chest for a long time. Carded that thing all around all these moves that we had had in like a few years period of time. We were nomadic for about a year and stuff. And someone said to me, they're like, just because if you get rid of this hope chest that does not fit in your house, it doesn't mean you don't love your grandma. It doesn't mean you don't have a connection to her. And I was like, that's so true. Things do not connect me. Now, if it was her wedding ring, I think it would be different.
Right.
But this little like other ring that she sometimes wore, I was like, yeah, it would be nice to have it. I would like to have it. But it doesn't mean that I don't still feel connected to my mom in a very deep way that's beyond that ring.
Sharon Pope, now that you have nothing in your hands and no possessions in your life, it all burned down. That's fine. If you could
Well,
sit on
I do now. Right now. I just didn't
if you
recognize.
if you could sit on a bench on a perfect day and have a long conversation with anyone, living or deceased, who would you like right next to you?
So it would be my mama. And you might say, well, she passed away a year and a half ago, but she struggled with Alzheimer's for about 10 years. And so that wasn't a time that you would be asking lots of questions about their past, right? And so I feel like I knew my mom as a mom. I knew my mom as a wife in terms of what I saw, even though obviously I wasn't married to her. But I don't feel like there's so many questions I have now about who she is as a woman, who she was as a woman, and even before she became a wife and mother. I got a little whiff of it one time. She told me that when she was in college, she wanted to be a journalism major. And a professor told her, well, you can't do that. You're a woman. And then she changed her major and she went down an entirely another path. I feel like there's a lot of richness there that no one ever really asked her about that
Yeah.
there's so much I want to know.
It's so common we hear people who say something similar on on
Yeah.
podcast. And my encouragement, if you still have a parent out there who you can sit down and interview and pry that kind of information from, we should. What an opportunity to really learn from those who've come before us. So, what's the best advice your sweet mother or anyone else ever gave you?
Become love, and you will never have a shortage of it in your life. We get really hung up on having love pointed at us, but if we can just get focused on love flowing through us, the rest of it takes care of itself.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
Darling girl, because you have to speak to yourself kindly. Darling girl, you are in control of very, very little. And here's what's great about that. It's going to turn out better than you ever expected.
Sharon Pope,
Yeah.
it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
She showed up and she loved. That's it.
Sharon Pope, you have shown up, you have loved, and now you've spent the last decade plus teaching others how they can do the same in their walk. I appreciate you working with several of my friends one to one as a coach, as a leader, as an example. I appreciate you spending part of your day with my audience on the Live Inspired podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you really for all the work that you bring to the world and the light that you bring. It's bright.
My friends, that is the beautiful Sharon Pope. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired. Well, my friend Sharon Pope shared so many ways to strengthen the connections in our lives. But one that stuck with me was this: we can't pour into others if we are running on empty. When we take time to refuel, whether it's a quiet walk or journaling or simply savoring that morning coffee, we show up better not only in our own life, but also in the lives of those we love. As partners, as parents, as colleagues, as friends, these small, consistent moments of care don't just make life better. They make love deeper, our impact greater, and our days more meaningful. Well, my friends, if you enjoyed this episode today, I think you're going to love the conversation that I had about, I don't know, a couple years ago with gratitude and happiness expert Shawn Achor. Shawn reminds us during this episode that it is in the darkest times that we can find the greatest optimism, gratitude, and social connections that matter the most. After 12 years of earning dozens of distinguished teaching awards at Harvard University, Shawn became a New York Times bestselling author of The Happiness Advantage. I know many of you read it. And The Big Potential. He delivered a TEDx talk with more than 19 million views and has worked with dozens and dozens of Fortune 100 businesses. It's a conversation that will give you tools to approach today, tomorrow, and every day of your life going forward with gratitude, with optimism, with happiness. Check it out with my buddy Shawn Achor, episode number 408. Check it out, episode 408, or cruise with me right now to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. And I will have a link in today's show note for Shawn's episode. As always, you know I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm grateful you tuned in this time. And until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired.